Good afternoon. You're the last voice to hear today. So my role is really to bring today a close to what is our second annual Resources and International Development Conference. It was entitled Shaping the Future, and I think we've all heard a bit of some great comments about the future of the resources sector, and in particular in developing countries around the world. Like Alan, I want to thank all of today's speakers and panellists. I hope that you enjoyed the format where we've had a lot more Q&A. And in particular, I want to thank Alan Fanning. I think you've done a great job. You've done a great job for us in fostering discussion through those panels, enticing debate and discussion. I think each delegate will come away today with increased awareness of the challenges, some insights, and hopefully some potential solutions to what we would call the utopia state of the time when we can get perfect harmony with the resources sector, the governments in which these developments are being pursued, the communities in which they service, and the environment in which they are. And I think that really is a utopic state that we'd all want to be to get to that sort of perfect balance. So Alan, I thank you for that discussion today. I'm going to close with a few comments. Today I heard a clear acknowledgement from industry, government, and those members here of the community that we each want to hold each other to a higher level of account in developing resource projects in developing countries around the world. Best practice is going well beyond the requirements of law, and as Ford Murray stated, it's going beyond the floor of moral conduct, which is that of legal requirements. Industry does have some of the best practice examples now. We heard some best practice examples today, and they do come from the majors as well as the minor and middle firms in the resources industry. Best practice is a journey in this sector. The industry has made significant strides in putting in place long-term infrastructure requirements, addressing a lot of the environmental challenges that the industry faces, both in developed and developing countries. But as it engages with community, that journey is still continuing. What I believe we're hearing today is solid steps forward by government and industry in establishing free and informed consent and well-developed programs to engage the community, particularly on new projects. I think we've got a lot of challenges in the industry ahead. Some of those challenges are changes in the psychological contract that we heard today. I thought that was a great comment, the psychological contract that we have and that industry has with the communities in which they support and the governments that support those communities. The challenge that we have is that psychological contract, as was stated today, will vary over time. Communities will have different expectations, as will the government, as their elected entities and members change. And the real challenge for us in developing a holistic approach to the engagement of communities around the world is putting in place a foundation that supports a changing requirement and need. I believe a lot of the programs put in place at the moment in developing new projects, it helps industry because they have certainty. But how many of those programs are going to sustain the robustness of time as those changing expectations evolve? Another key challenge is balancing the values, basic rights, and community norms in the local context in which the projects are delivered. I think we heard a lot of that today, in terms of the expectations and how we would address things like recognition of issues, related to the females in Papua New Guinea. I think it was a great example there about how just paying some form of consideration is not taking into account the real cultural norms and challenges and rights of the communities in which we're implementing these projects. The other big challenge we're going to have is we're now looking at projects that affect basins or large areas. It's not just one resource company. There could be many resource companies impacting this one or multiple neighbouring communities. So our projects and solutions have to take into account how we're going to get resource companies working together to develop more holistic solutions, not just working singly. A big challenge that I heard today is the lack of regulatory environment and quantifiable measures to hold majors and minors in the resources sector accountable for when they're not adopting best practice. We have got in place a number of good measures related to economics and even in the environment. When it relates to engagement of the communities on a sustainable manner, we don't have quantifiable measures of which to hold industry accountable. I think here there's a role for government and industry groups alike. There's also the key challenge in developing countries in terms of the regulatory framework that exists to provide transparency, fiscal accountability, full and open disclosure of where the money is coming into governments and how it's being spent, the legal framework to support and establish repatriation and recognition of things like rights and cultural norms. It's clear from the presenters that I've heard that the journey to best practice will be accelerated only through strong leadership. I think we would all in this room today admire the courage of firms like Barrick Gold, and even the story that we heard today of Fortescue via the Walk Free Foundation example, where they're bringing out the courage to acknowledge past wrongs, but doing something about them. And I think from all of us, it was great to hear those particular challenges and what's being put in place. Acknowledging the problem is, as we all acknowledge, would be the first important step in coming to the right solutions. Resource firms do have a key role to play in influencing the industry and its engagement in the community. Resource firms do have an influence. They have an influence on the suppliers that service them, the communities they support, and because they can generate large royalties to governments, they do have influence on government. Getting to best practice will require a cultural shift. A cultural shift that's gone past just, I think, what we heard today. There were some examples of more like token outreach programs. And is half the money we're spending on these programs, is it working? Is half not? And which half, I'm not sure. I think it was a great example. But so really, leadership and engagement of communities is about a cultural shift and a true engagement of the senior executive team in understanding that all aspects of a project's development, its expenditure, and the engagement of the local community and employee base has a role in delivering sustainable development outcomes. Resource firms have demonstrated in the past that they can actually change the culture of the communities and the suppliers that work for them. An example is safety. Right? If you look at most resource firms right now, they've gone well beyond the standards of law. From our own example as Cardno, resource firms have changed us. They changed our culture. And they said, you won't work for us unless you provide an environment that is safe for your people and safe for even your suppliers. We've seen in our firm a horrible lost time injury rate of 4 per million man hours go all the way down to 0.25 in the course of 4 years. Amazing track record for us. The 4 was a statistic we don't publicly acknowledge because we're too embarrassed by it, right? But we've made an amazing journey, and the resources sector did that to us. I think the resources sector here has a key role similar to play with safety in driving how well they work with and encourage others to engage the communities in terms of best practice. Governments also have a key role to play. They have a role to play in providing the foundation, the regulatory environment to provide certainty for the resources sector. Industry associations too, and agencies such as Transparency International, are responsible for helping make sure that the governments are informed, there's transparency, that really provide the environment for best practice. On behalf of Cardno, I hope that with all of you that you agree that today has outlined some of those challenges and some key approaches to how we're going to achieve, hopefully, best practice and that utopia state. I'd like to thank many of the delegates who travelled. We've got some people here from the United Kingdom, Mozambique, South Africa, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, and even the United States. I appreciate all of you for making the effort to travel here to Melbourne to visit us, and I hope that we see you again next year for our 3rd conference related to resources and international development. On behalf of Cardno, we do want to thank you. As a firm, this is an area of expertise working in developing countries that is not new to us. As a firm, more than 70% of our almost 8,000 staff, actually work outside of Australia. So it's more than 70%, 73% of all our staff are working currently in more than 120 countries around the world. What we bring to the industry, to the governments, and to the international aid sector is a unique blend of expertise. We can bring engineering capability for which Cardno has always been known, along with one of the world's leading environmental and natural resource management consulting practices, and link that with our strong and robust expertise in building social programs that engage communities and leave long-term, lasting, sustainable impacts together. We'd like to offer you, the governments that are here, the clients and industry that are here, those services if you wish. And I just want to acknowledge a couple of people in the room for you to talk to as we go into drinks. But Roger Collins-Wilcox, who is our Australian New Zealand manager, if you can hop up, Roger. We've got Ross Thompson, who heads up our Cardno emerging markets at the back there. Marianne Boland, she runs our Washington-based practice there. And David Burton from the UK. I don't think Kristen is here, is she? No, she's not. So with that done, that's the rest of the main proceedings for today. We're now going to adjourn outside for some refreshments. Thank you for attending this conference, and we hope to see you again next year. Thank you.